Hi everyone, myself Anju here. I have totally 15 years experience in IT industry. So I have been working in multiple technologies like Linux, AWS Cloud, shell scripting, Terraform, Kubernetes, GitHub, like all kind of monitoring tools. So I've been teaching in a corporate. So today I'm going to teach you about Kubernetes, which is nothing but a container orchestration. And in that, we are going to cover up what is pods, all the fundamentals about the pods, and how do we create a pod, what and labels, how do we assign a labels, and what is the role of and labels, and how do we create a replica set, and how this pods will be creating in that with that replica set, and what is the role of these labels in that pods and the replica sets. Okay, so I have created an EC2 instance here, and which is configured with a Kubernetes, and I'll be logging into that server, and we'll show you that the practical sessions, whatever we discussed here. So I'm going to share my screen. Yeah. So here I have an EC2 instance, so I'm just logging into that. kubectl get pods, kubectl get nodes. So this is my master machine, and in that I'm going to create the pod. Here we don't have a control plane. I'm in the worker node. We have only the control plane server. So usually we cannot create the pods in the control plane, but I have enabled to create that. So that is the reason I'm able to create the pod here. So how do we create a pod? We can say kubectl get pods, kubectl run, and the pod name. So I can say my pod, and I can say that what image should be used. Image is equal to, I can say the one of the image called Nginx. Now we can see that it's pod created. So we can say kubectl get pods to see that pod. So you can see that the pod is currently running. The name of the pod is my pod, and the status is running. So when I say kubectl get pod, and we can say -o wide option, it's actually show you that pod in a more detail, like the IP address of the pod, and the name of the pod, and the status of the pod, right? And if you want to see more detail about the pod, you can say kubectl describe pod and the pod name. So we can see more detail about the pod here, right? So when I say describe here, the name of the pod we can see here, and this is running in a which namespace? It's a default namespace. What is the service account, and what is a node? It's actually the pod is running. The pod starting time, what is the label it has? So there is one label already by default created. Run is equal to my pod, and annotations, status of the pod, and the IP address of the pod, and the container. So there is a container running inside, right? And what image is used here? What is the image ID for that container? And the port number, host port number, status, it's running. And there are a few more information. And even if you want to see the log of that container, so you can say that kubectl logs and that the pod name, so that we can see that the logs from that particular pod container. I mean, inside the container will be running inside the pod, right? That container logs we can see here. So this is a way we can see here. So now there is a command called kubectl get pods my pod, and we can see that the label name of that pod. So show hyphen labels. So we can see here, right? That pod has a label called my pod. So if you want to list that pod with that label name, we can say get pod pods hyphen L and the label name, L for label. So we can say run is equal to my pod. So we can see that that particular pod has been listed here, right? So if you want, we can add a new label for that to that same pod. So we can say we can just open the file, edit that current pod by using kubectl edit pod and use that pod name, right? Copy paste here, enter. So just come down. So here we can see a label here, right? It's called labels, and under there is a run column my pod. So we can add our own label here. Just at the below, we can say, I'll say app column. It's a web server or something like that. And another label I can say env space prompt. So there are three labels I have assigned. Now I can check kubectl get pods hyphen n, or even there is another command to see the all the labels. Enter. We can see here, right? This pod got three labels. One is apps, web server, env prod, run my pod. So we can list all the labels by using the comma, like env is equal to prod, comma, app is equal to web server. So now we can see here, right? The pod which is running have three labels. So this is a way we can create a pod and we can assign the label. Even if you want to modify the label, we can just edit that, right? So that is a way we can just do that. So how do we create a so when we list out this pod using the -L option, this is called a selector. Selector in the sense we are selecting the pod with the label names, right? So next thing we can create a replica set. So what is replica set? Replica set is actually used for creating multiple pods with the same configuration. And replica sets always make sure that the certain number of pods should be run in all the time, or the desired number of pod needs to be run all the time. So it will always make sure if I say I need to run three pods, then replica sets make sure that the three pods are running or not. If any one of the pod failed, he automatically the replica sets create another pod and to make sure that there's three pods are running. So let's see how to create that. So before that, I'm going to delete this pod, kubectl delete pod and the pod name. Now, if I check the pod again, that pod is been deleted. Now I'm going to create the replica set using the manifest file. So I'm going to create a manifest file called, we can give any name like replica.yaml. The file should have a replica YAML extension, and I need to say API version colon space apps slash v1 enter kind colon replica set. So the R and the S should be in the caps, and metadata colon and the name of the replica set. So we can give any like I'll say my RS, the short name, and the spec space enter, and under the spec we need to say replicas. How many replicas? How many pods we need? I'll say three, and I say selector colon, and here we need to say the match label. Match labels colon enter, and you need to say that app colon the Nginx, and then we can say I'm sorry. Yeah, so we need to say about the match labels, and we are going to say that what label we are going to use for this particular pod. So it will create three pods, and each pod will be getting the same label name. Okay. And the next thing is we need to say about the template here. So under the selector, we have to create template colon metadata colon labels app Nginx, then spec containers hyphen name of the container. We can give any name for the container, and the image. So what image will be used for creating that container? So I'll explain that. So here we can see that on the top, the API version is apps/v1. and the kind is replica sets. The resource name itself replica sets, and the metadata is my name. It's the name of the replica set is my replica sets. Given as a short name, my RS spec. In the spec, we need to say that how many pods we need. It should make sure the desired count of pods or how many pods need to run using these replica sets. And in the selector, we need to say that match labels. So in the match labels, which all the pod are having this label name. So those pods will be belongs to this replica sets. And in the template, we are saying that in the metadata, the pods should, while creating by this replica set, should assign this label name app colon nginx. And under the spec, we are saying that which container, the name of the container, and the image being used for this container. Save that. And we can say kubectl get pods. There is a pods running. Kubectl apply -f and replica set.yaml file, the manifest file name. So if I say enter, so there is an error here. So we can see here that what it says in the replica sets strict spec.template.metadata labels. So it has some problem with labels, I guess. Let's check, double check. So the spelling mistake of the labels, ELS, right? Save that. Created. Now when I check kubectl, get RS. RS is a short name for the replica set. We can see that the replica set is running here, right? Even we can say replica set. It does the same output. Even if you want to see the more detail, kubectl describe RS and the name of that, my RS. So we can just scroll up and see that the replica set name is my RS. It is running in the default namespace, and the selector my app is equal to nginx. So this is the label is looking for. I mean, which all the pods are having this label, then that pods will be part of this replica sets. Okay. And this replica set doesn't have any labels because we did not assign or given any label name for this replica sets. And how many the current pods are running? 3. And the desired in the sense, it will always make sure that 3 pods needs to be run in this replica sets. And the pod status is all are running. Okay. And the label name, what is assigned for this pods is app is equal to nginx. And the my container is what is the image being used for this container, and the host port number, other details we can see here, right? And this is the log of that replica set. And we can check kubectl get pods. So how many pods are running currently, right? So we can see there are 3 pods are running here, which is created by the replica sets, right? Even if you want to see that all the pods labels, we can say show -labels. So again, yeah, we can see here each pod has a label called app is equal to nginx. All 3. So this is assigned by the replica sets itself. So actually replica sets is looking for the label name, which all the pods are having this label name, then those pods are part of the replica sets. But even if I create a new pod with the same label name, it will not become a part of replica sets because replicas set already have enough pods. I mean the 3 pods. That is what the desired count. If that desired count already satisfied, then it will not look for another container, right? But what I can do, one test scenario here, I can modify one of the container label name and let's see what will happen, right? So I'll just copy one of the pod name and I can say kubectl edit pod and I can say that pod name here, right? Enter, and then just look for the pod label name. So we can see here, right? The labels and nginx. I'm going to modify that. So instead of app, I'll say just test. So this will modify this pod label name. Now, if I say kubectl get pods and -show -labels, we can see that there is a label called app is equal to test and the pod is running here, right? But we can see earlier we had only 3 pods, but now we can see there are 4 pods. The reason here, when I rename that, the label name of that pod is now the part, not the part of the replica sets, because replica sets always looking for the label name called app is equal to nginx. When I rename that, the label name, the pod is now not the part of that particular replica sets. So what happens, the replica sets has had only 2 pods because one is actually renamed with the label name. Then replica set created one more pod to make sure that there are 3 pods are running. So replica set created immediately a new pod with that same label name. So that is the reason we can see that there are 4 pods are running. So these 3 are the part of replica sets. Now this pod is not the part of the replica sets. It is just an individual pod. In the sense, we create a pod manually, right, with the kubectl create. So that is the way this pod is now currently the status. So when I delete the pods, we can see that kubectl get rs. So I'm going to delete that pod by the replica set kubectl delete pod and the replica set name my rs. So not the pod, delete rs and the my rs. So it deleted. Now if I check get rs, there is no replica set now. If I say get pods, only one pod is running now currently with the label called app is equal to test. So this pod is not deleted by the replica sets. This pod actually created by replica set, but while deleting, it did not delete by the replica sets. Why? Because the label name is different. So replica set doesn't know about this pod. So this is the way actually the replica set works actually. It's always looking for the pod name, sorry, the label name. Okay. So I hope you have understand about this class. Thanks everyone. We will see in the different class.